What's up, everyone? Welcome to The Plot Strikes Back. Nick here to talk about the 1923 Season 2 and series finale. It is full of brutality, violence, and emotion, which honestly wrapped up the series quite well, despite some things that I've seen people be a little bit upset about. Obviously, the entire season kind of feeling a little bit rushed or dragged out in certain episodes, and it really being the end. And I question, could we have gotten here sooner, or rather have more things filled out along the way? I said this in a previous video of mine where when the war takes place, we're going to see a lot of people with no names, fall prey to the casualties of war. And obviously that happens where we see Cara Dutton being a bit of a beast with that elk rifle up in the window, just, sniping people away. Even Elizabeth gets a kill, although, she's in a spot where Zane says not to be. It kind of helped him out in the long run because though he does get shot, he almost gets killed if it wasn't for Elizabeth, ironically. Now, obviously, the star of the show really is Spencer Dutton with Brendan Sklenar, and he is literally a man's man, and you gotta admire him and everything that he really stands for. And honestly, it's the real reason that I continued watching the show is because, it is a strong masculine character that we need to see more of. And just by him showing up at the ranch alone shows him and shows us that he literally is like a one-man army. I mean, one of the other guys says, "Man, Spencer, I didn't even have a chance to fire or shoot my gun or kill anyone because he, takes a few people out with his elephant rifle," which I forget who it was. It'll be hard to kind of shoot around corners. And Spencer's like, "Buddy, with this gun, I don't need to shoot around corners. I need to shoot through them." And obviously we see him in a nice
triple kill
with the three guys outside. He takes out the guy that has the Tommy gun that was, pinning down Cara up in the window. And then he just goes in dual revolvers, bam, 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 like
running riot.
A dozen guys just like that, no problem, because Spencer is that guy. He is him, and he's been in an actual war and knows how to survive and how to win a battle. Now, obviously, when he finds out that Donald Whitfield is responsible, when Spencer comes barging in there after he easily takes the guy outside, shooting Donald in the gut was great. Tells the other girl to hightail it because, she doesn't like them, obviously, with the black eye. He takes out Lindy because Lindy just doesn't stand a chance either. And that whole conversation about, finally understanding who he is. And Spencer's like, you killed my wife. Because he did, inevitably. This whole war wouldn't have happened, and it wouldn't have been fallen on Donald Whitfield's shoulders as being the one who's responsible, as had he just left the Duttons alone. And it was quite satisfying to see Spencer just say her name, says Alex, because you killed my wife, bud. You're going to pay for it. Because, he would have stayed in another continent with her at that point, or honestly, it would have been a nice, fairy tale. The Duttons would have been left alone, but it only takes a villain to start a war. And thankfully, Spencer does not hesitate and puts another 2 bullets, including one right in the middle of his forehead, and that's it. No more Donald Whitfield. And I think Jacob Dutton is also in that moment very relieved because he knows and understands that this has finally all come to rest, but at what cost? Because in the family has to go through sacrifices to protect it. And we've already seen Jack fall prey to Clyde, unfortunately, when he was ambushed. Although he did mess up himself, he should have stayed put and he would have lived, right? But he kind of disobeyed his father's orders. And the one thing I wondered too in a previous video was if Banner Creighton was going to turn on Donald Whitfield, and he kind of does here in the finale. This guilt, his consciousness is understanding that, he hasn't done good things in this life because he's tried to do what's, quote unquote, best for his family, but he's also started a war through Donald Whitfield or via Donald Whitfield. And it's obviously put him in his family in a bad spot because if war comes to his doorstep, he'll even feel more responsible. So he says, let's just get up and leave. And you can't blame him for that because he's obviously having second thoughts, regret sinks in, and he wants to leave. He wants to get out of here and go to Portland, and he is almost on the right track. But obviously when you hear he has to go to the Livingston station, he's gonna see Jacob Dutton, which he does, and they have a pretty interesting conversation because Jacob says, you can't leave. You helped start this. You're responsible just as much as Whitfield is. Sure, your family can get on the train. I won't harm them because, Jacob understands the value of saving family and protecting family, but someone's got to pay for it, and Banner has to man up and pay his debt. And everything is just sort of peaceful up until the point where the train comes, and Spencer even sees some people trying to, casually hide a rifle or a shotgun or a pistol, but he's no stranger and is obviously very good at observation and understanding what's about to take place. He's very tactful, as we've seen and know of. Sure enough, the fight breaks out. Everyone's getting shot. Sheriff McDowell gets shot. I thought Jacob might get shot there, but he doesn't. The interesting part is you see Clyde crawling underneath the train, and it's Banner Creighton who saves Jacob from getting shot because he's trying to do the right thing. But why does he save Jacob? Because he sees Spencer save his wife and kid getting aboard the train. Oh my God, this is Banner's redemption. He might actually get to live through this. Maybe at the very least, he might have to go to jail, but who knows what they could maybe figure out, right? Maybe Spencer talks to Jacob and Sheriff McDowell says, let him leave. He saved you. Let him just have a second chance. But it's Sheriff McDowell that shoots Banner, and Banner falls and dies. So he does pay for his debts. He does pay for the cost of what he helped start. Unfortunate as it is for his wife and son, but now they can carry on and live in their own future. The saddest and the most emotional parts of this episode, this finale here, is encompassed around Alex, because we see that frostbite has taken a hold of her. She's necrotic in her limbs, and obviously if you know anything about that, the chances of her living are very, very slim, especially in the 1920s. And even though there's a doctor aboard the train on the first class section that is able to treat her, or at least tend to her, it's not good enough to save her life. Right before that, again, mentioning and seeing how much of a man Spencer is when he runs through the train, jumps off the train, and runs all the way back to her. And while they should just save their conversation for later, the fact that he's just baffled that she's here and what she's had to endure this entire time, and you can't help but feel happy for them in that moment, for them being reunited. But there again, she wouldn't have had to have gone through all this had the war never taken place. Had this, everything started because of Donna Whitfield. She's done her best, and Spencer carries her all the way back and is able to get back on the train. And that's again where the unfortunate part continues on. I don't know about you guys, but I really couldn't help but feel so sorry for both of them, because it's this romanticism that is taking place here in both aspects of a young Alex who's like 23, 24 years old, and then Spencer who's I think maybe about 30 something, if I remember correctly, of his time period. But it is quite interesting to see how much they love each other in that moment, still knowing that the outcome in the future might be very, very grim, but they try to hold on to what hope they can. And even if it's just a 1% chance that everything works out in the end, they're still going to try and see that through. As the doctor on the train says, we can't get off at Livingston. We need to get off in the next town over, because we'll have an ambulance there and she can be taken to the hospital where there are doctors that can actually treat this sort of interesting procedure that she might have to endure and go through, which we'll get to in a moment. Jacob is able to also board the train because the doctor thinks he's been shot, but it's just old wounds that have, ripped open. And I thought he got shot there for a moment too, but as he states, no, it's just an old wound, no worry, no bullets inside. And I love the conversation that he's having with Alex, like the fact that he's able to meet her, talk a little bit about just life in general. And even when they get to the hospital, the conversation that Jacob continues to have with Alex is very special, before Spencer and Cara show up later. And you love that exposition, the touching moments that they have. Here's his nephew's wife that Spencer would not have fought so hard for if he didn't really love her, because she is very special. As we hear later on, he says she was like a shooting star, just wild, passionate, full of life. And she really was. And I got to hand it to the actor that portrayed Alex, because I really think she did a tremendous job through and through. I think both of them had great chemistry with Alex and Spencer, and it sucks that she died this way. I don't know if it was necessary for her to die, and obviously Paul and Hillary, who died from being frozen to death, were because of Alex's maybe neglect or naivete from not adhering to the lady at the gas station saying, you guys should really board the train from here on out. That at least would have given her a better chance at living. I think this method of having her get killed off was quite brutal in some aspects, because she did have another chance at living. As the doctor said, we need to amputate her hands and part of her legs, which she contemplates in that moment. I don't want to live this way for the rest of my life. I don't want to have stubs to try and raise a baby. Now, granted, she would definitely have a lot of help between Spencer and Cara, who Cara has to take care of little John Dutton anyway. So at least Alex would have been able to see her child grow up and live and just grow to obviously who we know John Dutton is, and live her life life with Spencer. And yeah, I understand, like, it would really be hard, especially in that time frame, because it's not like they have any sort of devices that they can attach, to her hands or feet. It's the tragedy. It's almost Shakespearean in a way. It's so poetic, where she just decides, I'm going to die here on this bed, in this hospital bed, with a premature born John Dutton, but I'm laying next to the love of my life that she didn't really know for a long time. But the moments that she did have with Spencer, she cherished 110%. And again, that's what makes it romantic. But obviously you see the masculine side of Spencer and just doing what he can. What does she want? What can he help her do? Even if it is just laying there with her and comforting her and just, again, sharing these last moments together, which means the world to both of them. And when the morning comes, she's gone. And obviously Spencer is heartbroken and is like, I don't know what to do here with this baby. Luckily, Cara does, and so does Jacob. And it really sucks because I wanted to see them live through the end. I don't know why it had to be so dramatic, but that's what drama brings to shows like this. And we've seen it quite before in the Yellowstone series in 1883. So in some cases it does make sense for Sheridan to have written it this way, but I don't know, maybe we do see a happy ending once in a while. When Spencer gets back to the ranch and he kind of continues on, Jacob is retiring because he's like 80 years old, and there's this really peaceful narration from Elsa Dutton that talks about Spencer. He doesn't remarry, he lives for another 45 years, and he just carries every memory he can with him until at some point he stops kind of remembering what she might have looked like, because it's not like they had pictures back then. They didn't have a chance to take a picture of her. So he just starts to create new stories, new memories of the two of them, of what they might have done as he grew older and if she grew older with him. And if my math is right, he passed away around the same age as Jacob in his early 80s. And they cut to this scene where it's essentially heaven, right? I don't know if that was supposed to be depicted as them dancing like on the Titanic. It almost reminded me a little bit at the ending of Endgame when Steve Rogers is dancing with Peggy Carter, although that's not in like the afterlife. It's just this moment where they're finally together, even if it is in the afterlife or what they are perceiving to be as heaven. And you see Spencer and Alex reunite once again for the last and final time. And she says, what took you so long? And smiles, and he's handsome, she's beautiful, dressed in black and white. And maybe that is the peaceful moment. Maybe that is the happy ending where or Taylor Sheridan, wrote it the way like they do end up together. I enjoyed it. I understand that, again, some of the episodes throughout season 2 could have been shortened, or they could have gotten, more precisely to the point in some cases. But, it really is interesting the way it all kind of worked out. I enjoyed it. It was packed with everything. Even Tiona, gets some justice. And obviously we knew that she wasn't going to die because her lineage has to live on, but she's free to go. We know where John Dutton's parents come from now. It might be the best 2 hours of the entire season, and maybe the series for that sake. I definitely think there are some things that it could have been shortened, condensed, cut out. I am curious to see what you guys would have to say about this. If you have any comments, leave them below and I'll reply back to them that way. If you did enjoy this video, I would appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up button, hit subscribe for more content, the bell for notifications, and I'll catch you in the next video and live stream here on the Plot Strikes Back. Cheers.